He never imagined a simple morning commute could turn into a nightmare. One moment, he was just another man heading to work the next. He was fighting for his dignity, his safety, and his life, all because someone decided he didn't belong. Cameras caught what happened next, but what the world didn't see was the truth behind those few unbearable minutes. This isn't just one man's story, it's a reflection of something far deeper. So, the question is, how many more times will this happen before we finally learn? Marcus Johnson had a routine. Same bus, same coffee shop, same corner office he'd worked his way up to after years of proving himself. Every morning, he left his small apartment just before sunrise, tie neatly knotted, headphones in, a quiet sense of pride guiding his steps. To most, he was just another man heading to work. But for Marcus, every day felt like a test. One wrong glance, one misunderstanding, and everything he'd built could vanish. His coworkers smiled politely but never quite looked him in the eye. His boss praised his attitude, but somehow, Marcus was always the one asked to represent diversity at company events. Still, he pushed through, focused, determined, tired of needing to be twice as good just to be seen as enough. That morning was no different, at least. It didn't seem to be. The city hummed softly, the air crisp with early light. Marcus adjusted his tie, checked his phone, and stepped into the crosswalk, just as a black SUV rolled to a slow stop nearby. The tinted window lowered just an inch, and someone inside said something he couldn't quite hear. He turned his head, uneasy. That was the moment everything began to change. The SUV stayed there for a second too long, engine humming. Window barely cracked. Marcus felt the weight of that stare even without seeing the eyes behind the glass. He quickened his pace, trying to shake the unease. The light changed. The car didn't move. By the time he reached the corner cafe, he could still feel it, that invisible tension that seemed to follow him everywhere. He brushed it off, ordered his usual coffee, and smiled at the barista. She smiled back, polite but guarded, the kind of smile that says, asterisk, I see you, but I don't really want to. Asterisk. When Marcus turned to leave, the SUV was parked across the street. A man in a suit stepped out, tall, expensive looking, and already frowning. Their eyes met for the first time. "Excuse me," the man barked, striding across the street without hesitation. "Did you touch my car?" Marcus blinked, caught off guard. "What? No, Don't lie to me," the man snapped. "I saw you near it." People started looking. Phones lifted. A few whispers rippled through the small crowd. Marcus tried to steady his voice. "Sir, I didn't touch your car. I was just crossing the street." But it didn't matter. The accusation hung heavy in the air. And suddenly, the truth didn't feel like enough. The man, a well-known CEO, as Marcus would later learn, stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You people need to learn respect," he muttered. The words hit harder than Marcus expected. Asterisk. You people. Asterisk. He felt the heat rise in his chest, but he stayed still. He'd learned long ago that defending himself too strongly could make things worse. Then came the flash of blue and red lights. Someone had called the police. Marcus's heart dropped. He hadn't done anything wrong, but in that moment, he knew it didn't matter. He raised his hands instinctively as two officers approached. The CEO spoke first, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's him! Tried to damage my car!" The officer turned to Marcus. "Sir, step aside. Let's talk." Marcus tried to explain his morning routine. The coffee, the walk, but each word seemed smaller than the last. One officer checked the car. The other questioned him, eyes cold, tone sharp. "No damage here," the first officer finally said. The CEO's jaw tightened. Well, maybe he was times about times two. That was the moment Marcus realized this wasn't about a car. It was about perception, about who was allowed to be believed. He could feel every gaze on him, strangers, coworkers passing by, the barista peeking from the cafe window. To them, he wasn't Marcus Johnson, senior analyst, quiet and dependable. He was just another black man surrounded by cops. The officers eventually let him go. No apology, no acknowledgement. The CEO smirked and got back into his SUV, muttering something under his breath before driving away. Marcus stood there, hands trembling, coffee cold in his grip. Around him, the world carried on like nothing had happened, but something inside him had cracked that small, fragile trust he'd been holding on to for years. He turned back toward the office, but this time, each step felt heavier. He didn't know it yet, but that encounter was only the beginning. Because by the end of the day, Marcus would be the one holding someone else's fate in his hands. Hours later, the city sky cracked open with rain. Marcus stayed late at the office, hoping the storm outside would quiet the one inside his chest. But fate has a cruel way of circling back. As he stepped into the parking garage, he heard the screech of tires, the crunch of metal, the desperate cry for help. He ran toward the sound, instinct taking over. A black SUV had slammed into a concrete divider, smoke rising from the hood. The driver's door wouldn't open. Marcus saw the face through the cracked glass times him. Asterisk. The same CEO, the same man who'd humiliated him that morning. Now, trapped, gasping, terrified. Marcus froze. For a moment, the world narrowed to the pounding in his ears. The irony was brutal. The man who once looked down on him was now looking up, begging for help. "Please!" the CEO choked out, voice trembling. "Help me, please!" Marcus hesitated. Flashes of the morning spinning through his mind, the accusations, the humiliation, the way no one believed him. Part of him wanted to walk away, to let karma finish what it started. But another part, the part that still believed in something better, stepped forward. He pulled at the door, metal groaning, smoke thickening. Flames licked the edges of the car. "Come on!" he shouted, straining against the twisted frame. Finally, with one last pull, the door gave way. Marcus grabbed the CEO's arm, dragging him clear just as the car erupted behind them. They fell to the pavement, coughing, soaked in rain and smoke. The CEO looked up at him, eyes wide, face pale, guilt written across every line. Marcus didn't say a word. He just stared back, chest heaving, caught between rage and relief. The sirens echoed closer. The world felt suspended, two men, two realities, colliding in fire and rain. And as the paramedics arrived, the CEO whispered through shaking lips, "Why did you save me?" Marcus looked at him, eyes heavy, voice quiet. "Because I remember what it feels like to be unseen." The next morning, Marcus woke to headlines he never expected. Asterisk. Black man saves prominent CEO from fiery crash. Asterisk. Cameras showed his face, but not the truth behind it, not the humiliation, the hesitation, or the pain buried beneath that act of courage. The world saw a hero. Marcus saw a moment he couldn't forget. The CEO, now recovering in a hospital bed, released a statement calling Marcus a remarkable example of forgiveness. But Marcus didn't want praise, he wanted change. He wanted a world where he didn't have to prove his humanity through an act of heroism. Days passed, and messages poured in, some of support, others of disbelief. Strangers said his story gave them hope. Others asked how he could save the same man who once looked down on him. Marcus didn't have an easy answer, because deep down, he knew this wasn't just about him and that one man. It was about every moment people like him were doubted, dismissed, or devalued until tragedy made their worth undeniable. He went back to work, but something was different. When his coworkers looked at him now, they saw what they times should have seen all along times. Not a token, not a threat, but a human being. Still, the memory lingered. the fear, the silence, the split-second choice that changed everything. As the rain fell that night, Marcus stood by his window, watching the city lights blur. One act of mercy had rewritten two lives, but mercy alone couldn't rewrite a system. He whispered to himself, almost like a prayer. Maybe one day they'll see us before they need us. And that's the question we all have to face. How many more Marcus Johnsons will it take before the world finally learns to see before it's too late?